Hey guys, happy Wednesday, hump day, and welcome to the Fox 5 Live Zone. I'm your host, Guy Lambert. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on the show today, by now you probably heard, Sean P. Diddy Combs found guilty on 2 of the 5 counts. We're going to break it all down for you. A potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. We'll get the latest. And over the river and through the woods to Grandma's house we go for the 4th of July. AAA going to join us to break down how the roads are shaping up. All that and more, but first, let's get a look at the weather. Tucker Barnes joining us right here on the LZ. What's up, my friend?
Hey, happy almost July 4th weekend. Yeah, we're just a couple days out, and weather is, let's start with good news. We do not have any severe weather on the forecast.
Okay.
We don't have any major humidity in the forecast, and honestly, it's going to get better from here.
I absolutely love
Later
it.
this afternoon, we'll get some sunshine. And then by Thursday and by Friday, by our holiday, it's going to be picture perfect around here. We'll look at the weekend forecast as well coming up. Let's do numbers midday. That is not our very own Ocean City. That's Ocean City, New Jersey there in the background. Been watching the surfers all morning. You a surfer?
I boogie board.
Okay, that's a
Yeah,
good try.
I'm a pretty good boogie board. I'm serious.
I took surfing lessons once in Hawaii.
Oh.
Yeah,
How'd you do?
I took great photographs at the end holding the surfboard.
And you're also here as a meteorologist. So.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I'm any threat to win any surfing contests. Those are real deal. Those waves in Hawaii are a real deal. I mean, I'm not messing around there. Okay, 73. Yes, only 73 degrees. Let me start with this. Cooler afternoon and progressively less humid afternoon. And as I mentioned at the top, no severe weather in the forecast. That's a live look at the satellite radar. And back edge of the front knocking on the door. Guy, you see just out to the west there, parts of along I-81 there, Western Maryland, West Virginia, now getting the clearing skies. That's our mid to late afternoon forecast. So hang in there. It gets better with each hour. Rain showers are mostly fading across the bay at this hour. If you're down at the beaches, the clouds will linger a little longer. But I think for all of us, as this front gets east, we should get in on sunshine later this afternoon and progressively less humid with daytime highs only in the mid-80s. So shaping up to be a very nice afternoon. Of course, we had severe weather last night. We had flash flooding last night. We had, all the fireworks that Mother Nature could provide as we broke that heat wave during the late afternoon, evening yesterday. Big picture, look back towards western Pennsylvania and Ohio. That weather moves in tonight, and then we are off and running in what will become a beautiful weather pattern. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all feature temperatures a degree or 2 below normal. No rain, no thunderstorm activity, and the best part for this time of year, fairly low humidity. So it's going to be absolutely fabulous around here. We just got to get that front a little further east. And again, all that dry air from the Great Lakes builds in. Oftentimes this time of year, our cold fronts don't really clear us. They kind of hang up across our region.
Sure.
This one's able to get just far enough south and east. We're getting in on the good stuff. So it should be a brilliant forecast as we get into Thursday, getting out of town the next couple days. The road should be in good shape weather-wise. Friday, fabulous. You can get up in the morning, go to a zip trip, Solomon's Island, and join us. And then midday, go to some 4th of July parades.
Even better.
And then late afternoon, go down to the mall and hang out a little bit.
At night, meet me at the Beyonce concert.
And we talked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
Go to the Beyonce concert, and as pointed out, if you get the cheap seats, you can enjoy Beyonce and probably see the fireworks off in the distance.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
By the way, I'll be the only guy without the cowboy hat.
You got to go up to the very top.
Well, that's always good. Be at the
Find
top.
Guy, get a picture. It's like, where's Waldo?
All right, Tucker Barnes with all things weather. Fine, Waldo. Hey guys, if you haven't already done so, make sure you download the Fox Local app. That way you can take your weather on the go. Well, it was the verdict heard around the world. In a mixed verdict, jurors in the Sean Diddy Combs federal crime trial acquitted him of the most serious charges, racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but found him guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs could now receive a prison sentence of up to 20 years. The maximum is 10 for each of the transportation convictions. If he had been convicted on any of the other counts, the 55-year-old could have faced up to life in prison. Joining us now to discuss this big story and so much more is Jessica Lettingham, criminal defense attorney, yet again back here on the live zone. Always good to see you, Jessica.
Always great to be here.
All right, these are the days we live for.
Yes,
It is a busy day. First and foremost, your overall take on the verdict that was rendered.
I was 5 for 5 guesses on this. I had guessed surmised that he would get not guilty on the RICO and the 2 trafficking charges, however, that he would get guilty on transportation for prostitution. So I'm not too surprised in any of this. I really think that the prosecution had overreached, and I think Comey's having a bad day today.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but it's to my understanding that with regard to the prosecution, from a federal standpoint, 90% of the time they're able to get a conviction. This is a major loss for them, is it not?
It's actually higher for that in that district of New York. I think it's at 93%, the Southern District of New York. They are always able to get a conviction because they only bring cases that they think they can win and big ticket items. So this is a huge loss.
If only we had happened to be in the courtroom at the time of the actual ruling, if you will. We were told that, well, in essence, Diddy really gets a second chance at life. Family members inside that courtroom cheering. Diddy then turned to his mom and said, "Mom, I love you." Some people in the courtroom dabbing their eyes, wiping away tears. Chants of dream team coming from his family as they looked at his attorney. Yet again, this is a major break for Diddy, but I want to make sure we have this correct here. So, you heard me make mention that, in essence, he faces now 10 years maximum for each of the charges that he was convicted of. But a lot goes into this, and I believe that deals or pertains to his past history. And we know that he has not been convicted of let's say, a crime in that realm before, so that should come into play. Will it not?
That will come into play, but obviously the prosecution is going to be gunning for him, if you will. They're going to want maximum 10 years per count. They're going to try to get 20 years for his prison sentence. Obviously, his defense attorney team, his dream team, if you will, is going to push back really hard on that. But you're going to have another big fight. So it's not over yet for him.
Yeah, well, that big fight starts right now. And what do I mean by that? At 1 o'clock, both attorneys on both sides, the prosecution and the defense, it's to my understanding, will present letters to the judge. What they're arguing is to whether or not Diddy should stay behind bars or should he be set free pending his sentencing. What does that mean and how does that work?
So this is actually fascinating because Comey didn't have the case law that the judge wanted ready to go. So a lot of times while you're waiting sentencing, you can get a couple of months, couple of weeks outside before you get your affairs in order. That's routine. Obviously, if he had been convicted of RICO or the trafficking, he wouldn't be given that chance because it's too big of a crime. But because it's smaller, the judge said, Comey, to the prosecution and then to the defense, can you give case law? Do we typically allow them to leave for time being after people have been convicted on this charge of transportation for prostitution? And Comey said, I don't know. The only cases I have in regards to this are transportation of prostitution of minors.
Wow. So thus far what has been presented, would you say that perhaps Diddy will literally walk out of that courthouse? The door we saw, his family members walk out, his daughters, his mom, the lawyers. In essence, there's a crowd standing outside the courthouse right now. It's taking full screen of the actual crowd waiting to find out as to whether or not Diddy is going to walk out those doors that you're looking at. Do you think that will happen?
I understand that the judge is not going to like Diddy and he's going to want to hold him back, but he's probably going to have to let him go when you don't have the case law, and this is a less serious offense than what he was actually charged with, and he was found not guilty of all of the very, very serious offenses. It is very routine and standard that the judge would let him go, and I think his defense made a great argument in which they said, look, his private jet is not here. We will pay any amount that you ask for. We will make sure he follows the law. So the judge is going to have a hard time saying no to his defense counsel.
It's to my understanding that he would also have to post $1 million in bail. I was a little confused about someone vouching for him, and I'm hoping you can walk me through that. And so if he is released, to my understanding, someone would have to sign for his release. So let's say his son or his mom. How does that work?
So if he doesn't come back, well, now the son or the mom could end up in jail.
Oh, wow.
So, it's like saying, I promise that they're going to be doing well. I promise that I'm going to make sure that they're following the law and that they're not going to abscond.
Let's revert back to the jury, and yet again, very fascinating. We know yesterday that they were stuck on the RICO charge. They then went home, or after the judge said, you know what, guys and gals, you got to get it together. They went home. They returned today after returning in only 45 minutes. After more than weeks of testimony, they were able to come up with a ruling. What does that mean to you?
That means that there is a holdout, that there was a holdout that didn't want to say not guilty. There was a holdout that wanted to hang the jury. And when the judge said, I'm not going to let this happen, you guys have to make a verdict, whether it's guilty or not guilty. You could be here all day Wednesday and possibly all day Thursday. That holdout said, never mind, I'll join the crowd and I'll also say not guilty.
But yet again, it's to my understanding that the judge was really pushing this because the courts would be closed tomorrow, obviously, for the 4th of July as we get ready for that, and also on Friday, correct?
Well, the courts are closed on Thursday. However, the judge has the discretion to bring everyone, the jurors, back and make them deliberate on Thursday. So there was always a potential that the judge was going to make the jury go into deliberations on
It's
Thursday.
just fascinating to me that they were up against the clock based on a holiday. Is that typical?
Well, that also, you're tired, you're exhausted, whether
Got
it's
it.
a holiday, whether it's a weekend. I mean, as we've discussed before, this is a very long, tedious football game. Can you imagine sitting in that courtroom for 5 weeks? You just want to go home.
Yeah. Diddy has now been behind bars since September. That is almost a year, Jessica. And yet again, he could very well walk out of the courthouse awaiting sentencing within the next hour or two. Once sentencing happens, and we'll end with this for now, we know that, as you just heard me make mention, nearly a year behind bars. Does that count as time served if he is sentenced?
It does count as time served. And I really want to add the detail that just because he only got convicted of those 2 counts, he's still facing hundreds of millions of dollars of lawsuits with all of the civil lawsuits. So his life has not been achieved, is not reclaimed yet.
All right. This is one of the first times, and not the last, that we will touch on this throughout the afternoon. Yet again, we are awaiting to hear more as to whether or not he will stay behind bars awaiting his sentencing, or if he will be set free. It's unbelievable after spending almost a year behind bars. That is supposed to happen at 1 o'clock. And really quick before I move on, I want to clear that up. We know the letters will be presented to the judge at 1. How long will it take before we know what the judge decides?
It depends on the judge. The judge could take his time, take a few hours, or he might decide tomorrow. It depends on how thorough he really wants to research what they've done.
Wow. Well, to your point, we know that the judge has stated that ruling will happen today. So we will know today.
Okay.
All right. Jessica Lettingham, criminal attorney. You're going to be here all afternoon, right?
I am, yes.
All right, guys. Yet again, fascinating. The latest with the Sean Diddy Combs crimes case. Moving on to politics, the deeply divided House is set to take up President Trump's sweeping tax and spending cuts package after Senate Republicans narrowly approved the measure yesterday, with Vice President J.D. Vance casting the tie-breaking vote. Today, Trump will personally attempt to convince House GOP holdouts to back his bill before the July 4th deadline. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Mr. Armin Kurdigan, U.S. Navy captain, retired, and California State Senate seat candidate. Good to see you, Mr. Kurdigan.
Good afternoon, Guy.
All right, let's jump right into this. In this case, we know that House leaders are really working to get members back to Washington, D.C. Why? Because they're next up in order to cast this vote. Do you think it will happen, sir?
Well, they'll definitely have a vote. The question is it's going to pass? You've got folks in the Republican caucus, 20 or 30 of them, that are really, really torn right now. They understand that it's very, very dangerous for us not to have a budget this late in the fiscal year. I mean, we are in the 4th fiscal quarter already, but they're also very concerned about the amount of the deficit spending, or basically the increase to the national debt, which is a very, very serious problem. And we keep seeing this over and over again, no matter who's actually in charge of Congress. The last time we were able to really get meaningful deficit reduction work was back in 1995 and 1996. So it's going to remain to be seen what actually happens. Ultimately, I do believe that the bill is going to pass, but it's going to leave probably a bad taste in a lot of folks' mouth.
The roughly multi-trillion-dollar bill, Armin, would unlock tax cuts and funding boosts for national security, partly paid for by the largest cut to the federal safety net in decades. Your take on that?
So there's 2 things going on. First of all, it's true. A lot of the tax cuts that are going to be out there are really going to affect and improve the lives of working class families who are, 2 or 3 kids in their household, both parents are working, extended child credits. You're going to have extension of the standard deduction, expansion of 529s, a lot of things which working family needs in order to make their lives go better and go forward. A lot of the concern about the cuts to the safety net, let's remember that safety net was very widely expanded under the last administration by executive order. Just tens of millions of new people were put onto the rolls for Medicaid, Medicare, non-citizens getting a lot of these benefits. So essentially what's being happened is they're rolling back some of these expansions, many of which were unwarranted and without any means testing to these folks, which will eventually bring the spending back down. You see, the more and more money you give out, the more and more money and benefits people actually want. So I think it's actually a good thing to rein that back in, but also the healthcare system's got to do their part in bringing costs down.
Armin, you heard me make mention of the Sean Diddy Combs sex crimes trial. That's happening in New York City. I want to move over to Brooklyn in this case, one of the courtrooms there. We know that a federal judge there has blocked the Trump administration's attempt to end temporary protected status for Haitian migrants ahead of schedule, ruling that the Department of Homeland Security, in essence, violated the law in its rush to strip deportation protections and work permits from over 500,000 people. Your response to that?
Well, let's face it, these four countries, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Haiti, they are not good places to live. Haiti is a failed state, and a lot of folks came to this country. I think some of them do have legitimate requests for asylum. However, once again, the Biden administration just went way overboard, just bringing everybody in. And frankly, just because you have a poor life in one country is not a valid grounds for asylum. So you've got a little bit of an issue here. I think perhaps a little bit more time to look at some of these claims would be warranted. But ultimately, I think the administration is going to get its way, and a lot of these people are going to get shipped back to Haiti because, you know, as sad as the state is, we simply can't absorb that many people all at once from these other countries simply because they're poor and impoverished, or they have really, really bad governments or no governments whatsoever.
Armin will end with this, and that is the saying, can't we all get along? Apparently that's not the case between President Trump and the head of the Fed, Mr. Jerome Powell. We now know that Mr. Powell is stating that the Fed would have cut U.S. interest rates by now if it were not for Trump's tariffs. That according to him as it happened. Your response to that, sir?
Well, that might be the case with some of the inflation predictions, but we see where tariffs are right now. They haven't really had that big of an impact on inflation. I don't think they really are, and a lot of economists don't think they are. The Fed is behind in cutting interest rates, but at the same time, the Congress and the White House are behind in bringing back deficit reduction. If we keep spending at this rate, the rates are sadly going to stay where they are because printing a lot of money, that probably has a lot more of a greater impact on inflation than tariffs did. We saw what happened with $1.2 trillion of additional spending in the Green New Deal. We saw $6 trillion of COVID spending, some of which was warranted, but others, you know, hundreds of billions, probably a couple of trillion was probably wasted where it didn't need to go. So if the government keeps spending at its current rate, it's going to be very hard for the Fed to bring interest rates down, which in turn is going to keep our interest payments very, very high. It is an exceptionally heavy break and ball and chain on our economy. Until that happens, ultimately, it's the American people who are going to suffer either directly or indirectly.
And yet again, something we'll have to keep a very close eye on. Mr. Armin Kurdigan, U.S. Navy captain, retired and political strategist, joining us right here on the Live Zone. Always good to see you, my friend.
You too, Guy. Thanks. Have a great day.
As you heard me make mention, one of the big stories of the day happens to be GOP House members and, well, let's just say Democrats as well, both going at it, if you will, surrounding the big, beautiful bill. At issue, will it get passed? They are debating just that on the House floor. Let's take a listen in.
The manager of the pending resolution would have to yield for any such amendment.
Well, that kind of seems like a silly rule. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Gillen, for the purpose of unanimous consent request.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to amend the rule to make in order the amendment at the desk that protects against any cuts to Medicaid and to SNAP.
Gentlelady from North Carolina has not yielded for that purpose, and therefore the unanimous consent request cannot be entertained. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Morrison, for the purpose of a unanimous consent request.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to amend the rule to make in order the amendment at the desk that protects against any cuts to Medicaid and SNAP.
The gentlelady from North Carolina has not yielded for that purpose, and therefore the unanimous consent request cannot be entertained. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Brownlee, for the purpose of a unanimous consent request.
I ask unanimous consent to amend the rule to make in order the amendment at the desk that protects against any cuts to Medicaid and SNAP.
Once again, the gentlelady from North Carolina has not yielded for that purpose, and therefore the unanimous consent request may not be entertained. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Torres, for the purpose of a unanimous consent request.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to amend the rule to make in order the amendments at the desk that protects against any cuts to Medicaid and SNAP.
Gentlelady from North Carolina has not yielded for that purpose, and therefore the unanimous consent request cannot be entertained. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Capter, for the purpose of a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr.
You're listening to members of the House debate the big, beautiful bill. Obviously, it had passed in the Senate yesterday and now heads to the House. Yet again, not without controversy. We'll continue to monitor that throughout the afternoon right here on the Live Zone. Well, President Trump now urging Iran-backed Hamas militants to agree to what he called a final proposal for a 60-day ceasefire with Israel in Gaza. The deal will be delivered by mediating officials out of Egypt. In a social media post, Trump said his representatives had a long and productive meeting with Israeli officials about Gaza. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Mr. Scott Feltman from One Israel Fund, yet again back here on the Live Zone. Scott, always good to see you, sir. Welcome back to the show.
Pleasure's mine. How are you, Guy?
I am good. A busy day, both here in America and, of course, overseas as well. In this case, we're particularly talking about the Gaza Strip. Scott, I can tell you I'm not in that part of the world, and I'm making reference to the Middle East. But what I can tell you that what's been happening between Iran, Israel, and now America has been dominating the headlines right here. However, it appears a deal with regard to Hamas and Israel coming to, let's say, terms, well, that's been happening all along.
Yeah, I mean, they've been trying for months now to get a deal. Israel wants a deal. Israel has agreed to the outline put forth by Advisor Witkoff numerous times, and Hamas has rejected it each time. In fact, according to my sources, Hamas has rejected it again now, although I think there's some pressure being put on them to reconsider.
So with that being said, we know that Trump said, quote, "I hope for the good of the Middle East that Hamas takes this deal because it will not get better." In capital letters, he then wrote, "It will only get worse." Scott, last time he said that, or something similar to that, America dropped several bombs on Iran.
Yeah, I don't think America is going to be dropping any bombs on Gaza anytime soon. But I think that the message is to Hamas that, you know, either come to a deal or we're going to figure out how to forcibly remove you from the Gaza Strip, which, by the way, according to a source today in Israel from Saudi Arabia, they're also putting pressure that they want Hamas eradicated from the Gaza Strip before they would even consider entering into any kind of peace agreements with Israel. So there's a lot of different moving parts here right now. The end result is Hamas is either going to get destroyed in Gaza or they will come to some kind of agreement which will allow them immunity to leave the Gaza Strip and live out their days elsewhere.
Yeah, we know that during that 60-day ceasefire agreement, should that happen, the two sides will work with all parties to end the war. As you just stated, unless I misheard you, apparently Israel says that they have to be removed completely from that region. Yet again, is that what you're stating?
I mean, that's what the Prime Minister has always stated, that Hamas cannot be involved in any further governance of the Gaza Strip, or we'll be seeing another October 7th, whether it's 6 months, a year, or down the road. It's going to continue to happen because Hamas's stated goal is the eradication of the state of Israel. And they've never changed on that.
So, Scott, as they say, as the young folks say, let's just be real. I can tell you, and I think you can attest to this as well, that both sides have shown little sign of readiness to really budge from where they're at. Why now? Why will something change?
So, first of all, you have to understand that the destruction of Iran's nuclear facilities, their ballistic missiles, and also their financial ability to support, as well as the destruction of Hezbollah, and to a large extent the minimization of the Houthis in Yemen, has really created a perfect storm, so to speak, with Hamas not really having many options here. You know, their financial resources are drying up. Their wishes that Hezbollah and Iran and the Houthis will continue to come to their aid does not seem to be working. I mean, it certainly isn't working. So they're kind of now at the end of their rope. So now it's a matter of what they decide to do. Do they fight to the very last, last soldier? Or do they figure out a deal with which to save some amount of respect and live out their days in Qatar or one of the other places in the Middle East?
I suspect that will be the topic, or among one of the many topics of discussion for President Trump and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as the two are scheduled to meet next week right here in Washington, D.C. What will it take in your mind for that meeting to be successful?
So I think it's already a success, the fact that the president and the prime minister have been working so closely together on all of these different issues. I think it's very clear that the prime minister wants to see our hostages fully returned, even though he has accepted a piecemeal agreement. You know, we want our hostages back, we want them returned, and we want Hamas to rescind their governance, if you want to call it that, of the Gaza Strip. It's a twofold message. The president understands it. I believe the president agrees with it, and now it's just a matter of figuring out, the parameters on how to accomplish both of those goals.
Yet again, that meeting will get underway beginning Monday, and obviously we will have continuous coverage of that right here on the Live Zone. We have been speaking with Mr. Scott Feldman from One Israel Fund. Scott, truly appreciate your time. Always good to see you, my friend.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Guy. Have a great day.
You bet. All right, guys, a couple of things we're following for you. We're going to take a quick break. On the flip side of that break, producer Chris joins us with some of the sizzling topics. But yet again, at 12:40, the latest on Sean P. Diddy Combs, found guilty on 2 of the 5 counts. We'll be right back. All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone, joined now with producer Chris with some of our sizzling topics for today. What's up, my friend?
Good morning, and obviously, a lot going on.
Yeah.
I'm here to kind of talk about some of the other little fun stuff that's going on. And we're going to start off by talking about morning routines. Do you remember when that guy's viral morning routine, he went and spent like 4.5 hours from wake up to his workout to his ice, dunking his, anyway, all nonsense. Theoretically. However, a lot of people take their morning routine very, very seriously. I asked you at the time how long it takes you in the morning. I think you told me about an hour.
Yeah.
About an hour. That's
I got to put on a suit and
completely
get
reasonable.
ready.
Yeah, this doesn't just, you don't wake up like this, ladies and gentlemen. This guy does. However, according to a new poll, 1 in 3 Americans say they are completely thrown off, their entire day completely ruined, if they mess with their morning routine.
I could see that. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Another good reason not to have one. The top disruptors: forgetting your coffee, not brushing your teeth, which seems like tough to forget. I've definitely not done it on purpose, but haven't forgotten. Skipping your glass of water, not showering, or not exercising. 40% of people say they already know if they're gonna have a bad day by the time they wake up in the morning.
Yeah, I could see that. For me, it's what I'm going to wear. I mean, you know, I have so many suits, and perhaps you want to pick the correct one. And then if I'm planning on wearing something, it's like when you want to eat something and you go to the refrigerator and it's not there because somebody ate it and you're so upset. Same thing with me. I'm like, oh, I forgot to put that suit in the cleaners. Yeah, then I'm upset for the rest of the day.
Which begs my question: have you always been kind of loyal to this routine, or has your schedule changed? Because you wake up very early in the morning and you have long days, so you might need to not only prepare for what you're going to wear or do when you walk out the door, but also what you might be doing 12 to 15 hours from there. Does that impact your morning routine, or have you learned to or adapted the practice of getting ready the night before?
No, I'm horrible at that. If you know me, I am the last minute guy. That should be my first name, last minute. That's always
guy.
me.
I shower the night before.
Yeah.
When I shower. I do not lay my clothes out, which is obvious, which is why I like the idea of a uniform, which is why I tend to wear just a different shade of the same exact pair of pants, the same shoes, and a white V-neck button down, or excuse me, a white V-neck, or just a white button down that is basically a V-neck, if you can see right here. It eliminates any sort of thought that I need to make when I wake up in the morning, because I have, again, an early schedule, so I like to just wake up and be able to get right out the door.
Yeah.
But there have been times where, I'm supposed to go to the gym afterwards and I left my sneakers at home, and I know it by the time I walk out the door, and I know at that point I just spent $65 or something like that that I'm not even gonna use because I'm not gonna make.
By the record, but for the record, I should say you're still cool because this guy rides a motorcycle into work every day.
That slows me down a little too. That's part of the morning routine, of putting the helmet on and all that sort of fun stuff. Let's talk about The Wire now.
Yeah.
It is a classic. It is largely considered one of the greatest shows of all time, set right up I-95 in Baltimore, aired for, I believe, 4 seasons.
Is that how long? I thought it was longer than that. Wow.
I'm trying to remember because there was the original season, then there was the school-based season, then there was the stevedore season on the docks.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there was the newspaper-based season. If I'm wrong, you guys let me know. However, people love the show.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not only a cult classic, but a critical classic. And the man you see right there, Idris Elba, who is starring in a new streaming movie called Heads of State that's available on Prime Video today, has never watched it.
I cannot believe
This
that.
was the role that introduced him largely to an American audience. He's had a long career, but Stringer Bell was an iconic character. People absolutely loved him. He was the one trying to take the gang, basically, for lack of a better phrase, and make it legitimate. He was the businessman. He recently sat down to talk about his career with Amy Poehler on her Good Hang podcast. She raved about the show. She loved it. She said, I want to talk about your current projects. I want to talk about your future projects, but if you'll indulge me for a second, I want to take you back 20 years to The Wire. And he said, I've never actually seen it. He said he's like that with a lot of his roles. Once he's lived it, he doesn't necessarily want to go back and revisit it. She asked him if he would go back and rewatch it now, and he said no. And one of the reasons why, and a little spoiler alert if you've never seen The Wire, so quick earmuffs if you've never seen it, this character doesn't make it all the way to the end. And he said when his character died, a little piece of him did as well. And so it's very tough to go back and rewatch it and kind of go through that all again, which I've heard this with actors before.
Yeah.
How you kind of do a role, you kind of commit to that role, and then you never actually see it and how it played out on screen. And that fascinates me because it's hard to picture how it all looks when you take that step back, because there are so many choices that go into it, from editing to directing to just the music, to not even know how that portrayal But you know what? At the same time, I'm sure there are enough people who have told him how much that character means to him that he knows he did a good job. It doesn't necessarily need to watch
I
it
think
himself.
once you reach a certain status, and I'm going to say this based upon my experience. So, a gentleman that works in radio, I'm not going to say his name, very successful, said to me, once he leaves a radio station and changes to a new radio station, he will never listen to that radio station ever again in his life. And I believe him. I've seen it. And so I think what happens is it's just your past, and you just move on. Now, for me, that happens to be, let's say, insecure and still working out issues. I want to know what's happening. I would go back and look at my work and see if I could do so much better. But I guess for some, been there, done that. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
That is just amazing to me.
It's fascinating to me,
Yeah.
especially sometimes when you have to think about the time period between filming something to the time period that it actually comes out. It can be a lengthy process.
Yeah.
So you might not have remembered, and not only that, but you might not have seen what the other characters are doing, how you interact with certain things, how storylines. I mean, if I was just going to recommend a great show to him to watch, it would be The Wire, regardless of the fact that he's even in it. But
Yeah.
he's got the millions of dollars. Could have been James Bond. He doesn't need to hear it.
By the way, I haven't seen an episode either. I'm sorry, man. I haven't. Take my card, man. He's already taken it.
I sit here and recommend shows to watch to Guy Lambert all the time.
Yeah, I'm
now
sorry.
I know that I need to start from the beginning.
I'll work on it.
Streaming
Producer
now on
Chris
HBO Max.
with all things sizzling right here on the Live Zone. Hey, when you get back to your desk there, make sure you check us out. The latest on Sean P. Diddy Combs, yet again found guilty of 2 of the 5 counts. We're going to have a panel join us to break it all down coming up next right here on the Live Zone. Going on, and specifically surrounding P. Diddy and right here in the studio. It was the verdict heard around in mixed verdict. Jurors in Sean Diddy Combs' federal crimes trial acquitted him of the most serious charges: racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. But I tell you, it was all about what he was found not guilty of. 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs could now receive a prison sentence of up to 20 years, the maximum 10 for each of the transportation convictions. If he had been convicted of any of the other counts, the 55-year-old could have faced up to life in the slammer. Joining us now, our all-star panel. Yeah, we call this the Avengers crew. Mr. Dante Mills, Mackenzie Joy Brennan, and Jessica Lettingham, all joining us right here on the Live Zone. Welcome, guys, to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Guy, let me just jump in real quick and piggyback off your prior segment. If you stop having me on your show, I'm still going to watch it. I'm still gonna,
well, Dante, you just made my day, my man. I truly appreciate that. I thought you were going to say you're going to take my black card because I haven't seen The Wire. That's a whole nother discussion.
Still going to watch you, with or without me.
All right, so let's jump into this. And I want to go down the road here. Dante, we'll begin with you. Your response thus far to the verdict rendered for Mr. Sean P. Diddy Combs.
I'm not surprised. I think the jury oftentimes, and I truly believe in our system, I think they got it right here. What the prosecution was able to show was that Sean Combs engaged in acts of prostitution and that he moved people around to do so. But what the jury said the prosecution failed to show was that it was a part of a bigger process or bigger organization or RICO experience where there were other co-conspirators or this was some larger thing. So what the jury was able to do was separate the individual Sean Combs from the mogul, P. Diddy or Puff Daddy, who had this business that was operating. They said it wasn't operating for the purposes of furthering any criminal activity. So I think the jury really took the time to go through this. You saw that even last night, there were some battles in that jury room where people were kind of holding strong to what they believed. They had the opportunity to go home and sleep on it and come back and say, this is what we think is fair. It was a split verdict where they said, here's what we believe he was responsible for and what was proven, and here's what he was not. And it was that he committed those individual acts of prostitution, that he didn't force anybody into it. It was all through their free will.
Mackenzie, would you second that opinion?
I certainly agree on the Mann Act convictions. I think for a while we've been talking about the fact that those are the biggest slam dunks, and obviously we knew that RICO was the hardest to prove. I am surprised that as of last night, somebody was so locked in their beliefs that they thought consensus was not possible, but then by this morning they had caved. That is a little bit surprising to me. And I'm disappointed in the sex trafficking outcome. I think that what we're seeing is a potential generational and certainly a gender split on the jury. And I know we don't like to acknowledge that, but it's true. The largest demographic was men over 50 on the jury. And I think that the concept of coercion for a young woman like Cassie, who started dating him when she was 19, the ways that coercion shows up for somebody like that and how it affects consent and perhaps the moment captured on video may be a newer conception of coercion and consent for some of the members of the jury. And it is what it is. It's a cultural battle, if you will, but I'd say I'm a bit disappointed, but not surprised altogether.
Jessica, I'd like to get your take on that as well, because Mackenzie is making mention of count number 2, sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. That was considered low-hanging fruit, if you will, but he was found not guilty. That means, in essence, the jury did not credit Cassie's testimony.
I think that they did credit her testimony, Guy. I think that they were able to weigh the fact that she was very financially invested in Diddy. And I'm going to have to disagree with my colleague, Kenzie, here. I have found that in a lot of cases, you actually want more women on the jury in cases like this, in sexual harassment cases, because women are actually harsher, because as women, we're harsher on other women and we think, well, you knew what you were getting yourself into. You know, there were so many statements from Cassie that she wanted the billionaire lifestyle and she wasn't willing to let that go, and she knew that the abuse and the freak-offs were a part of it. And I think that's what the jury and a lot of the media, as well as like the public, have really grasped on is, you know, you just because it was an uncomfortable situation and you were abused doesn't mean that you didn't also stay because of a financial motive.
We know that the defense presented their relationship, if you will, as somewhat of a Bonnie and Clyde love affair, and apparently it appears as though that the jury believed them. Let's talk about what's going to happen in about 16 minutes. And Dante, we'll begin with you. Yet again, we now know that the judge will at some point sentence Sean Diddy Combs or give him or his ruling. The question is, will he remain behind bars during that time? And we know at 1 o'clock, both the prosecution and the defense will present letters to the judge, in essence, pleading their case. Will they not?
They will. And what's going to happen is how sentencing works in federal court is there's this gap between when you're found guilty and when the sentencing happens, because there's this panel, independent person who does a review and prepares a report for the judge called the pre-sentencing investigation report, where they say, this is the person that you're sentencing. This is his background. Here's what he's into. So the judge has an idea and a full picture of the person he's going to sentence. Because that takes a couple of months, what Sean Combs' defense attorneys are arguing is he should be released during that process. Now, the standard is he a threat to society? And that's one of the issues. He wasn't released earlier given a bond because the prosecutors argued that he was trying to intimidate the witnesses in this case. Well, this case is over now. That part of the case is over. Those witnesses can't be intimidated because they either came in and testified or they didn't. So now that argument is removed. And the other issue is he a flight risk? And I think the judge is going to look at this and say, yes, it could be potentially 20 years, but that's not likely. We're really looking at a very low sentence compared to what he was capable of getting if he was found guilty on those other charges. So would he really risk going on the run for the rest of his life if he will be sentenced to a few years in jail? Is that trade-off worth it to where I think he won't show up for sentencing? I don't think the judge is going to say that. He's going to say Sean Combs will show up for his sentencing. I don't think he's a threat to society right now. And he should be given a bond while he awaits his sentencing day coming up.
Mackenzie, we'll move on to the point of sentencing. And to Dante's point, we know that he faces 10 years for each count. But we also know that he doesn't have a history with regard to what he was convicted of. And to my understanding, that's taken into account. Correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps minimum 2 years and to be served consecutively. Or concurrently, I believe that's the word. And so with that, is that something that you think will actually happen? And if so, why?
Well, I think you do have, on the one hand, cutting in the defense's favor, the fact that this is, his first federal offense. On the other hand, they do consider, especially in Mann Act violations, aggravating factors like force, fraud, and coercion, which obviously have come up here, and the number of victims. So those sort of things could definitely cut in favor of a longer sentence, and also the judge's opinion on whether the jury reached a just result in the sex trafficking and the RICO crimes. Because if there is collective social pressure, if the judge feels that those crimes were proven and the jury reached an incorrect result, that could be kind of remedied by adding more to a sentence. And the other thing is that he may not be a risk to society in the sense that he was when the trial began, but he's still facing multiple civil cases against him, I think dozens at this point. So the risk of witness intimidation and the risk of him using his tremendous financial resources to either flee or pay people off is still a pretty valid concern, and that also will apply to what sentencing is appropriate.
Real quick, Dante, have you practiced law within that courthouse?
I did. In fact, I've had cases against the U.S. attorneys on this particular case. I know that they really know what they're doing. They have good legal acumen. I think they just kind of overreached a little bit here because they prosecuted the person, I believe, not the specific charges. I think they saw what was happening around Sean Combs and the video of him being abusive and said, we need to bring this guy to justice somehow. I don't think that's technically how justice should be applied. I think if you're guilty of something, they should charge you with that and not try to expand it. And that's what I think happened here. And I think they're paying for it with this verdict. The jury said, yes, he committed prostitution, but the other things we just don't find credible. And that's why we got the not guilty verdict. But Guy, if I can really quickly, I just want to say, hopefully the judge does not say, I think he forced or coerced, even though the jury didn't. So I'm going to penalize him with my sentence for prostitution. I don't think that's justice either. If this jury said he's not guilty of that, then he shouldn't be penalized for that by some kind of added sentence to the prostitution charge that he was found guilty of. So this judge has to do a hard reset and say, yes, there are a bunch of allegations throughout this case. He was charged with a lot of things, but he was only found guilty of prostitution. What's the appropriate sentence for that?
I absolutely agree with that. I just want to say I'm right there with Dante on
and why?
sentiments. Because he was not found guilty of force and coercion. He was only found guilty of transporting to engage in prostitution, right? And that is, he was paying prostitutes. That is a non-violent crime. Yes, they had a lot of evidence of him committing violent crimes, but they couldn't convict him on it. And it's not for the judge to say, well, I don't really like you, I think that you got away with it. The judge and the jury heard the same thing. There wasn't a lot of evidence that the judge heard that the jury didn't. I think that the judge really needs to give him a lighter sentence than, maybe he would like to do, because that would be justice. The jury only found him guilty of those 2 counts, and that's to pay prostitutes to fly over the country / the world.
Yet again, we are awaiting the judge's ruling as to whether or not Sean P. Diddy Combs will spend time behind bars as he awaits sentencing, or will he be set free as early as today. We'll do that in about 10 minutes right here on the Live Zone. We've been speaking with Dante Mills, Mackenzie Joy Brennan, and Jessica Lettingham. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone. On your marks, get set, and go. Record-breaking July 4th travel is expected to jam D.C.'s roadways and runways. Nationwide, more than 72 million people are expected to travel more than 50 miles over the long Independence Day holiday. That's a 1.7 million more than last year and 7 million more than in 2019. Joining us to discuss this and so much more is Mr. Morgan Dean with AAA Mid-Atlantic, and he's kind enough to join us right here on the Live Zone. Good to see you, Morgan. Welcome to the show.
Great to see you, too. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Come, let's see, Friday. Oh, I can't wait to celebrate Independence Day. Let's start with the 72 million Americans that plan to, well, go over the river, through the woods to Grandma's house or wherever they're going to celebrate the 4th of July. That's the highest we've seen in the past 5 years, is it not?
It is. And the thing that's been unusual this year is the buzzword for 2025 has been economic uncertainty. But what we have seen both at Memorial Day and here with Independence Day is that people are prioritizing travel. It is a top thing for them, and they're going to try and get that in there, even if they have to cut or scrimp or save in some other areas. Really working on that work-life balance and making sure they get some of that downtime.
Of those going, let's say, to celebrate Independence Day, we know that 85% of them plan to do so by hopping in the car and, you know, grabbing mom and dad and the kids and maybe even the dog.
That is correct. And I think what's interesting about that is you kind of have two sets of people traveling this holiday. because our forecast looks at 2 weekends here around the 4th of July. One group kind of left out Saturday, Sunday last weekend. Then you got a second group traveling today and tomorrow to get to their destination for a long weekend for the 4th of July. Always a popular day for those that are going to be hitting the roadway. Very good way to get in a quick trip, especially if you're looking at it as a long weekend. Out to the coast, maybe up to the mountains if you're looking for some cooler things to do, or to the many fireworks shows all across the region.
Yeah, I'm a big DC fan, meaning I'd love to stay right here in the nation's capital and watch the fireworks. If it were not for that, I would probably travel to Ocean City. I love the beach as well. That's just me, and I'm sure a lot of other Americans plan to do the same thing. However, Morgan, if they decide to do so, they're going to need one thing, especially if they're driving, and that's gas. And in this case, we know that gas prices are down versus last year.
So, yeah, some good news out there. Just looking at DC metro area, $3.35 today. It is up a couple of pennies this week and over the past month, but down 32 cents from where we were last year. It's very similar in Maryland as well as in Virginia. And just looking across the country, 20 states right now that have gas prices still below $3 per gallon. If you are headed south for the holiday, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, all have prices below that $3 mark. So plan some of those gas stops out there. I don't know how many drivers actually remember how much they paid last year. We can also tell them we're looking at some of the lowest gas prices we've seen since 2020 leading into the holiday. So nice to have a few extra coins back in the pocket to do some other things on that trip.
But Morgan, what about all the chaos, if you will, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, that's taking place currently in the Middle East? Typically when we see something like that, we know gas prices shoot on up, and it's no secret, there is chaos.
So if you looked at it here recently with the price of crude oil, we did see a little bit of a roller coaster with some of the concerns with the conflict between Iran and Israel. But that was short-lived. Some of the concerns with that, I think, were that there could be some long-term issues or other countries being drug in, and we just didn't see that right away. So we've actually kind of seen a somewhat of a retreat on both crude oil prices, which has ultimately led to a retreat in gas prices at the pump across many places here in the U.S. That's not to say that that couldn't be a factor in the future. We also had the benefit this late spring going into the summer of seeing gas prices stay at a lower price than they normally do leading into that busy summer travel season. So that's part of why we've been looking at some lower gas pump prices here recently. And I don't think many drivers are complaining about that.
Morgan, I want to move on to safety precautions, and in this case, all surrounding the heat. It is hot, and I mean H-O-T. Typically, when I've, let's say, spoken with you guys and gals before, it would be during the colder months, and you would say, well, perhaps you need to have some type of, let's say, a flashlight and or blanket and or snacks in the car, but that would probably also apply to the warmer months as well, would it not?
We do. We recommend a winter emergency kit for folks, and it has some certain things in it that you need for the wintertime. Ice scraper, some kitty litter for traction. You don't need those in the car for the summertime, but you do want to have a summer emergency kit in there to make sure you have a few items in case you are caught in a slowdown or have a breakdown on the side of the roadway. You do want to have some water. You do want to have some snacks for you and everybody in the vehicle, including a pet if you're traveling with a pet. Some other things to think about, some jumper cables, a small set of tools, a good first aid kit to have with you. Also, something else a lot of people don't think about, if they have a dead battery, they can't charge their cell phone, having one of those portable battery banks that's fully charged so that you can plug your phone into it all the time, just in case there's an issue, can be a really, really good thing too. You talked about some of the winter effects on vehicles. Extreme summer heat can affect some things the same way. Cars do not like extreme cold or extreme hot, and we really see that with batteries. If you've had any issues here recently with your battery and your car slow to start, get that looked at. Batteries usually last 3 to 5 years, but heat can really take a toll on them. Get that fixed before it turns into an issue that has you stopped along the roadway.
Yet again, we have been speaking with Mr. Morgan Dean with AAA Mid-Atlantic with all the vital tips we need as we plan to hit the road and celebrate Independence Day. Morgan, truly appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Be safe.
You bet. All right, guys, we'll take a quick break. On the flip side of that break, the latest surrounding Sean P. Diddy Combs. That's coming up next, right here on the Live Zone. All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone yet again with the latest surrounding Sean P. Diddy Combs. By now, you probably heard mixed verdict. Jurors in the Diddy Combs federal crime trial acquitted him of the most serious charges, racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but found him guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Yet again, joined by my all-star panel, Dante Mills, Mackenzie Joy Brennan, and Jessica Lettingham, as we now await the rendering, or the ruling, if you will, from the judge as to whether or not Sean P. Diddy Combs will remain behind bars until he is sentenced. Dante, I want to begin with you because you've actually practiced at this courthouse, and a couple of things we're seeing. I could take a look right now. We see a crowd full of people standing outside of the actual courthouse. With regard to where, if Diddy is actually released today, is that behind those people that we're looking at, or is that across the street from there?
No, it'll be behind. That's the entrance doors to the federal courthouse. You'll see a bay of people there. There's also going to be a bay of people across the street. There's a lot of press in that area. I was just down in that area and a part of that process, but those are people that will be able to see him. Now, it's interesting to note, though, that this morning, Sean Combs woke up not knowing if he would have a guilty verdict that could potentially send him to jail for the rest of his life. And now he's hopeful that he gets out today, right? That might not be the case forever. He may be sentenced where he has to turn himself back in, but he could walk home today. And I think we've already heard from his son talking about spending July 4th with him. And I don't think a lot of people anticipated that even last night, once we heard that the jury had some issues with the verdict and that there was some split decisions. So I think in all cases, this is a win for Sean Combs. I'm curious to know if his defense team told him they're going to essentially accept the prostitution charge with the understanding that they're going to keep credibility on that, but convince this jury that it was just a personal preference, that he had kind of acknowledged that he used prostitutes, but it had nothing to do with the larger scheme or RICO, and that they should allow him to go home on that, which they ultimately did.
Mackenzie, many have dubbed this criminal trial the modern-day version of the O.J. Simpson trial. And in so many ways, there's similarities. Earlier, you made mention of the disappointment surrounding him not being convicted with regard to his actions surrounding Cassie. Would you agree that in some way, form, or fashion that these two can be aligned?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that that's where my mind goes with regards to the sentencing, because obviously when O.J. was sentenced for a much later criminal offense, there was some thought that the judge in that case had been sort of compensating for the not guilty verdict, which was collectively seen as unjust. I think that we did have some challenges with the definitions of the federal crimes here, but the sex trafficking to me was findable. And I guess we have yet to see what public opinion says about Diddy in the long run. I've already heard some people kind of pivoting from this is awful. We've seen a video of him dragging somebody and seen pretty unquestionable testimony of her bruises, of, you know, people texting his assistants and whatnot about nobody deserves to be beaten for this. And I've already seen some people pivoting now that there's a not guilty verdict to, well, maybe he's not that bad. You know, prostitution is a personal preference. But ultimately, if your personal private kinks involve compromising someone else's ability to consent and coercing them, that's beyond a kink. And that still is harmful to society. So we'll see where public opinion lands on this in the long run. But it is interesting to watch that pivot even as we speak.
Jessica, we know that it took weeks and weeks of testimony, but in all actuality, it took about 15 hours before the jury decided to convict Diddy of 2 counts. With that conviction, we know it came down to one thing, and that really happens to be the documents, meaning the flight records. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. With the transportation to engage in prostitution, yes, it comes down to the flight records, because they could easily show, the prosecution was able to show beyond a reasonable doubt, here are the flight records, here are him having them fly from one state to another state or to a different country. So yes, that's why it was so easy for them to find him guilty on those 2 charges.
Yet again, Dante, you have practiced law at the courthouse where Diddy is currently sitting in a holding cell, which brings me to my next question. Walk us through to where he is at. What does a holding cell look like? Who is he surrounded by? What is he able to do and not do inside that holding cell?
Yeah, so in a federal courthouse, it's a little different than state courthouse, a little fancier up there. So what they do is they have a holding cell in the back of the courtroom where he would be held when he's taking breaks in and out of the courtroom. But now that he's been sentenced and he's kind of awaiting the next hearing, which is going to happen later today, he's in the sheriff's, essentially the marshal's office. There are cells in there where attorneys can go and sit with their clients and talk about the case in screened off areas where nobody's listening in. There's private areas to speak with your client there, but he's with the federal marshals right now. They're holding him. Whether he's going to be released or not, he hasn't been released yet. So he is still under confinement in a cell with the marshals. I'm sure his attorneys are speaking with them. I'm sure they've already prepared parts of their brief with the arguments they're going to make to the judge to let him go. I'm also sure that the U.S. attorneys were prepared with arguments as to why he should stay in. They're going to say there was multiple people involved and there's still some risk there that he could either leave the country or impact some witnesses, and they're going to ask for a long-term sentence. The judge did state, though, interestingly enough, he said that he wanted to be convinced. He wanted the U.S. attorneys to show him some prior case or something where someone who was not simply, but found guilty of prostitution, where they were denied bail, because that's the reality this judge has now. He has to put everything else to the side and say he was found guilty of prostitution. Does that constitute a need to revoke somebody's bail and not allow them to be home when the sentencing is being prepared?
Yeah, we don't have a crystal ball in front of us, but Mackenzie, to Dante's point, it sounds like the judge is leaning toward the side of allowing Sean P. Diddy Combs to, in essence, go free until his sentencing.
It sure does. I think it'll be a challenge to find any case law that mirrors this situation, because on the one hand, he is somebody who has no prior convictions. This is just a prostitution transportation charge. But on the other hand, it exists in not a vacuum. Like, he is somebody who has millions of dollars at his disposal and all these other cases pending against him. And that, frankly, doesn't happen when you are a run-of-the-mill person. So to find an analogous situation will be challenging. And it does sound like that'll cut against the prosecution's favor in this.
Jessica, we know that, yet again, with the alleged crimes, he has now been found not guilty surrounding Cassie and Jane, as we know her. I would be somewhat concerned if I would happen to be either one of them. And there has been, several that have speculated as to why they should feel comfortable to continue to walk the streets, knowing that, Sean P. Diddy Combs at some point will yet again perhaps walk the streets again alongside them, and perhaps he would retaliate in some form or fashion. Have you ever seen that in any case?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously people retaliate against witnesses all the time. I'm hoping that Sean Diddy Combs is too smart to do so here. He continued to pay Jane's legal fees because his attorneys told him to. I think he has already felt what it could be like to have his entire life forfeited away. So I'm hoping that he's going to be smart and listen to his attorneys and just kind of leave them alone. I see Kenzie smirking and she's like, I don't know if that will happen.
Yeah. Mackenzie, did you want to respond to that?
I absolutely hope the same. Obviously, what comes to all of our minds is the fact that Kid Cudi potentially faced some retaliation from this same person for interfering perceivably in Diddy's life. So obviously the capacity is there, but you can only hope that he's learned something from this. And here we sound like we're gentle parenting this music mogul who has all the resources at his disposal, but I really hope he's learned something from this and that he does listen to his attorneys.
All right, so yet again, Dante, it's now 10 minutes past the top of the hour. We were told at 1 o'clock, to your point, both the prosecution and the defense would argue their case as to why Sean Diddy Combs should be set free pending sentencing. How long does this take? What's going on, is it happening in the courtroom, in the judge's chambers? If you could elaborate.
Yeah, so with high-profile cases, there comes this extra eye that's watching over everything, because the judge knows every decision is going to be scrutinized. So normally what would happen is once the jury decides guilt or innocence, I would stand up and make that application immediately in front of the court. The judge would hear from both sides and then make a decision on the spot most times. That's not going to happen here. I believe, and I wouldn't be surprised if this judge made a written decision where he kind of put some legal reasoning and analysis in there as to whether, Sean Combs will be released or not, because he does know it's going to be scrutinized. He also knows that the defense team, for example, has an appellate lawyer that's been coming to court with them every day. So if the decision doesn't go in their favor, it's more than likely going to be appealed. So I think that there's extra caution this judge is going to take some extra time. I also think, in fairness, this judge made an indication that he's going to decide today, right? You have somebody who should know whether or not they're going to be let free by the end of the day, and I think the judge will do that. But it's not going to be a spur-of-the-moment decision. I think it will be written down, calculated, knowing that it's going to be scrutinized by everybody, that once it comes out.
Yet again, my next question, perhaps it's hard to distinguish and or have an answer because we don't know how the judge is going to rule whether or not he could be set free. But Mackenzie, my next question to you happened to surround, as we wrap up, what ultimately, how much time do you think Sean P. Diddy Combs will get, if any? And does that, your decision on that, will it be based upon what happens in the next hour or two as to whether or not the judge allows him to leave?
No, I mean, I think it would be pretty reasonable for a judge to decide to let him spend the holiday with his family, await pending sentencing, and still sentence to something significant. I'm going to go for 10 years. It's somewhat wishful thinking that there's some recompense for him to think about what he's done. But I know that I might be erring on the longer side there.
All right. Jessica?
4 to 5 years.
And why do you say that?
I think because if you sentence him to, concurrent sentences, 4 or 5 years apiece, and then that way he's already done a year, and then he can be out with good behavior, in 2 or 3. So I could just see it being a lot less than the 10 years, which is what even Kenzie knows. It'll be a lot less than the full 10 years.
Dante, I pulled Jessica's move and got a chance to see you side screen prior to me asking you this question, and I saw you somewhat smirking when Mackenzie stated that she expected him to get somewhere between the 9 and 10 years. I would assume you do not agree with that.
We talked about O.J. Simpson earlier, right, and how he was found not guilty for double homicide, but then found guilty for taking his own material back and received, I think it was like 20 years for that. I think that would be the situation. If Sean Combs gets 10 or 20 years, with the 10 years combined, it's because he's being penalized for something he was found not guilty of. And I don't think that this is what this system provides for. This judge has to do a hard reset and say he was convicted of prostitution. Do we make somebody sit in jail for 5 or 6 years for prostitution? Is that beneficial to society? Is it a waste of resources? Are there better ways that we can rehabilitate and make sure somebody doesn't come back in front of us again? I don't think sending him to jail for a long time is the way to do that. If I'm his defense team, I'm talking about different ways that he can receive help, some different courses or classes so that he can be a better person, and that because of prostitution, sitting in jail for 5 years doesn't make sense. And I think that's an argument that the judge will buy. So I think his time is going to be limited. I would say in the 2 to 3 year range. He almost has about 9 months in. I could see him going back in for a short period of time and being processed out, because I just don't think prostitution equals 5 or 6 years in jail.
Well, as they say, the jury is out, and we'll have to wait and see. Yet again, we have been speaking with Dante Mills, Mackenzie Joy Brennan, and Jessica Lettingham, kind enough to join us right here on the Live Zone. Truly appreciate your time, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone on a Feel Good Wednesday. Hump Day! And
Well, that was
Annie
good.
Mae,
Hey.
which rhymes, joins us right here on the LZ. What's up?
I'm hanging. I'm having a pretty good day. I'm not even here on 4th of July, so this is like my Thursday, basically.
Yeah. Are you here tomorrow?
Yes, I am.
Okay, me too.
But think about it. This is like my Thursday if I'm not
That's
here
right.
on Friday.
Well, guess what?
It's
Me
not
too.
really hump day for me. Hump day was like yesterday.
Okay, so same thing for me, because you won't see me on Friday.
Sorry.
Hey, let's talk about some of the stories that you guys are touching on at home. I think you're really going to like this one, Annie
I like
Mae.
it. I like it.
Okay, we're talking about dating. Ladies, yes, all my single ladies, if you're looking to date, in this case, you probably don't want to wear pearls. What am I talking about? Well, a lot of folks are hopping on TikTok and saying that they are ditching pearls because guys will see them, think of, let's say, their grandma, and then run for the hills. And
Yeah.
so as a result, a lot of women, or single women, are now saying, you know what, don't wear pearls or make that a part of their jewelry. What say you?
Okay, I agree. To be completely honest, I really do. So, in terms of pearl jewelry, I 100% agree in terms of jewelry on your neck and like on your wrist. On your ears, I don't think it matters. I have pearls. I really don't think it's gonna turn people off. Not that I'm looking, but I really don't. I don't think it's gonna turn people off. These are like really in, like a dainty little, or like a big chunky hoop, but small. The big, huge earrings are not as in as they used to be. Like think about how the big hoop used to be in.
Sure.
Not really in anymore. It's the small, dainty, or like the big chunky are
Yeah.
kind of in for like my generation. And also wear a pearl if you want. I also have 2 on this side, so if I want, I can stick a pearl in the second one.
Well, you got this all worked
Yeah,
out.
but don't, no, seriously, the necklace and no, it's chuggy.
Yeah, it just reminds me, and I'm way older than you, it reminds me so much of my grandmother.
It does.
It really does.
I'm thinking of my grandma. You know?
Not only that, but her walking in wearing that Elizabeth Taylor perfume. I don't know if you even know what that is.
Oh,
but
yes.
so it's just really interesting that we have come to a time where even folks younger than me are saying the same thing. You know
Yeah.
what? Don't wear pearls.
Yeah.
The same study also found, though, that if women wear red nails, it makes a guy actually perk up a little bit. That's because it
Apparently.
reminds them of their mother, which, yet again, I don't want to date my mom.
That's sus. That's weird. I don't know how I feel about red nails. Obviously, I like red nails when I do like an opening day for like half.
Sure.
I'll do like a sharp red nail. But especially for this job, since I have 2 jobs, it's a little tough because like one day you'll be wearing brown and it doesn't really make sense to wear like a hot red and like a brown and then like a blue and then a yellow. Like we wear too many colors here that it doesn't make sense for my nails to be like a crazy color. So I'll do something fun, like a little natural moment.
Dang.
And then the craziest I get is for like Caps like home opener.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then it's like red, and I've got like designs and
But
like
you're all
lightning
red,
bolts.
yeah. You gotta
and
rock the
stuff.
red. It's your job.
Duh. The fun fact is like red is like my least favorite color.
Really?
It is. But it looks really good. It pops.
Yeah.
So I love to
I've
wear it
seen
for
you at the
that.
games many a times.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
always popping.
Always popping.
I would say this, and I'll end with this. That is, whether you wear pearls, red, or what have you, I think ultimately it's all about who you are and confidence. So
Yeah.
rock it out, you know?
It's about first impressions
There you
and
go.
about who you are. But nobody's going to be first impression by, oh, I don't like your grandma, Jules. It's not about that. Trust me.
Hey, when you wake up in the morning, how long before you realize it's going to be a great day?
The funny thing is half the time I'll get through half of my day and I'm like, oh my God, I had a really good day. And then one minor inconvenience later, I'm like, I'm going home.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going home. I'm the
That's
biggest
so
drama
funny.
queen. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't.
I asked that because a newly released study came out and it found that 37% of Americans know if their day will suck within, count 'em, 10 minutes of waking up. It really boils down to like forgetting basic stuff such as brushing your teeth. Who could
Yeah.
forget that?
I have a toothbrush here.
The way
So,
you make your coffee, having a hard time figuring out what you will wear during the day. So
Yeah.
does that happen to you?
Sometimes, I mean, oh gosh, it's hard because you get it nitpicked, right,
Yeah.
on TV. So it's like, oh, you look a little larger in that outfit. And I'm like, okay, well, I had a burger for dinner. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes it's that. It's more of like how confident I feel in like my outfit, more than like whether or not I like it. It's like some days I'll hate an outfit, but the next day I'm like, oh my God, I feel skinny this morning. I woke up skinny, and I'm like, so I'll show up and I'm like, oh, I'm rocking out the outfit. But I agree with like the attitude thing.
Yeah.
Usually if I'm in the car, it has to do with me for like how tired I am.
Yeah.
On a daily basis. If I'm super tired, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be a miserable
Which leads
day.
me to the next part of the study, and it
Yeah.
says that you have to get sleep in order for you not to have a bad day. For me, I'll tell you, I know immediately if I'm going to have a bad day, and it happens more often than not, if I cannot find matching socks.
Valid.
I don't know where these things go.
Okay, I would like to know because I feel like if they took apart the machine, all my Sonics would be at the bottom. Seriously, I lose them all the time.
Yeah,
I just order new ones.
It just irks
Every
me to
once
the
in a
edge.
while, you have to order new ones anyway. You also be ordering new socks.
Yeah.
If you have if they are stained and have holes in them, please order new socks.
Yeah. Or if I realize the next day that I've ran out of toothpaste, yeah, that kind of bothers me too.
That's annoying too, but I always keep an extra of everything. I have an extra of shampoo, conditioner. I'm prepared.
Yeah, I'm last minute.
I'm a girl though, so that's valid.
By the way, I brushed my teeth this morning.
There you
All
go,
right.
King. Me too.
We'll end with this, and that is Gen Z and millennials. Dirty little secret. We got a secret, Annie Mae. Embarrassing living conditions at home. Apparently, 45% of Gen Z and millennial Americans would feel embarrassed if someone saw their current state of the home. For me, it happens to be probably my closet. It is a wreck.
I'm trying to think of okay, so I feel in apartment buildings these days, everything's so small.
Yep.
So sometimes it's hard for me, even if I have everything in the right place, everything cleaned, all this stuff, it's hard for me to even really find a place for it. For me, it's probably my bathroom. And the reason is because I do hair and makeup and it's just crap everywhere.
Yeah.
Literally just stuff everywhere. But I don't know that I'd be embarrassed. I'm oh, sorry, I was getting ready earlier. For the most part, I'm relatively clean. And also, if people are coming over, odds are I know that they're coming over and I'll tidy up. So it's for me, it's that. But I wouldn't be necessarily, yeah, maybe I would if my mom came over. Because I'm thinking of my mom coming over and being it's dirty in here, and then tidying up around me. I'm relax.
Yeah, and
relax.
she's I didn't raise you like that.
But that's it. My boyfriend comes over, whatever. It's mainly my mom. It's my mom because she's you need to clean. I'm okay, all right.
It would be mainly everyone for me. If you walk into my condo, it's immaculate. It's clean.
Yeah.
I'm telling you though, you pull that closet door open, and seriously,
Bust it out. It's like a spring.
Oh my God.
A slinky.
I just have
falls
so many
out.
clothes, and so I got to do better. But I would assume I'm not the only one.
It's the amount of things that we have and the space that we have. That's why. That's why.
All right. Yeah. Well, cool. Yet again, another therapy session with Annie Mae right here on the
You're
Live
the
Zone.
therapist. I'm not the therapist.
I think it's the other way around. Hey guys, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone. Sylvia, our digital content producer, joining us with all things that you, my friends, are clicking on at home. Happy Hump Day.
Happy Hump Day.
Oh, I just realized I didn't wear pink.
I fell off the wagon for a little bit, but today, specifically with the gloominess when the day started, I was like, let me find some pink to help boost up the energy.
There you go. All right. So let's kick this thing off. In this case, we're going to start with one of the favorite places I love to eat at in the South.
Yes. Waffle House, if you all do not know. I think that's a dead giveaway, especially when you said in the South. Now, we do know that Waffle House had announced a couple of months ago, actually, that they were going to have a surcharge of about 50 cents because egg prices were skyrocketing, okay? They recently announced that they're actually removing that surcharge because prices are starting to kind of balance out, and as the government is saying, they're becoming a bit more affordable. So I really love that Waffle House is making this announcement, being like, hey, we don't want to charge our customers more than what is necessary based off of the supplies that we are coming in. Now, I do wonder if we will see changes across other businesses potentially who may have had a change in pricing based off of eggs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense. The eggs, the price actually gone down, so why not take that 50 cent away?
Yeah.
And
the
you know what?
transparency is amazing.
Kudos going out to them for doing so, because they could have easily said,
They
you know
could have
what?
kept it, you know? You could have held on to that. Like, maybe people would just notice as they go to the grocery store, maybe that there are changes, or maybe not. Maybe some businesses have kept a hold of that surcharge, but I love the transparency from Waffle House on this, and that is why you should be supporting that business.
I'm going to lobby for more Waffle Houses based right here in the DMV.
There should be, because there aren't many. I think there's just a few in certain areas of Virginia for the most part. Is there a Waffle House in Maryland?
I'm not familiar.
Not in D.C. for
yeah,
sure.
not in D.C. Well, yeah,
Maybe?
I don't think in
No, I
D.C.
don't
There
think so.
used to be one in Maryland years ago.
Yeah.
I remember it as an intern. I would have to go pick up food from there. The closest one that I'm familiar with, I think, is in Dumfries.
Yes, same. Right before that exit.
Yeah,
Yep.
So, and the staff, by the way, staff
Yeah.
is great there. Now,
Yeah.
one thing about a Waffle House, you're going to get a Royal Rumble there from time to time.
You don't know what's going on. I went to a Waffle House and the server sat down beside me and took our order. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, come on in, I guess.
Yeah.
But the food was amazing.
Food
so
is always great.
I was okay with that.
Yeah, shout out Waffle House, and thank you for taking away that 50 cents.
Yes.
And we're not talking about the wrapper.
Right.
All right, so it's the big story of the summer, and
Yes.
I gotta say, I'm actually going to this.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how amazing. Okay, yes. We all know that Cowboy Carter, Beyonce, has been on tour with her most recent country album, and it has really been the pinnacle of everyone's focus. I mean, I cannot scroll on social media without seeing a video from a concert, a look, an outfit, anything that's going on, and she is officially heading to the DMV this Friday to kind of round out her tour. And there are some things that you might want to keep in mind. And I'm going to be talking about Beyonce as much as I can until the concert is here and after, because, you know, she just does such an amazing performance and production. Now, if you've been on social, you may have seen that she was in kind of her red car that she had when she was hanging in the stadium, and she got stuck in there. Some people were wondering, will she come back out in the car? Because initially she did not afterwards, you know, and I can imagine there were some hiccups that happened there. You probably don't want to be hanging in the air in that car again, right? She actually did come back on stage for a second show for it, so maybe we will see that coming this Friday in DC. But also keep in mind how you're going to get to Cowboy Carter and how you're getting home.
Yeah.
Metro. Now, the Metro will be having free rides from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m., which is amazing. All courtesy to Beyonce, dropping a hefty bag, $100,000.
Are you serious?
Yes, indeed.
So, okay, real quick, I know you're going to go on, but I was under the impression it's because it's the 4th and millions of people are going to want to go see fireworks at the Washington Monument.
There's a compilation of things that are taking place here, but we have to acknowledge Beyonce's incorporation and what she has done to really make it accessible, especially with Renaissance. We saw how crazy it was then. So, you know, she basically has a true idea of what's going on in the city. And I really just love this. It's like accessibility, because you don't want to be there in an Uber or driving and get caught and stuck up. That happened to me and my friends. We had to get out of the car and walk at least 2 blocks to get there. Or even afterwards, you're thinking, it's fine, I'll call an Uber. Service is awful because everyone's on their phone. Everyone's attempting to call an Uber, right? So be sure that you are planning out your travel desires there and back ahead of time. I would recommend Metro. Along with that, you know that the closest Metro stations are going to be Morgan Boulevard and the downtown Largo station as well.
And if you haven't done that before, let me be the first to say it's somewhat of a walk.
Okay, yes. So you want to have some comfy shoes.
Yeah.
Also adhering to some of the requirements of Northwest Stadium when it comes to bags. That's something that a lot of people forget about every single time around. Yes, you can have a clear bag, but you still have those measurements that you were required to kind of
Sure.
stay within when you're heading there. Luckily, it does not seem like there will be rain this
no,
time
yeah.
around, so we won't have a Renaissance situation that occurred last year. But I'm so looking forward to Beyonce rounding out her tour here in DC. I'm wondering if there'll be other things that we may see that have not been used on the tour just yet. But yeah, go Beyonce.
Yeah. Real quick, to touch on that bag situation again, yeah, we cannot stress that enough. There is
Yes.
nothing worse, ladies, you walking there. Seriously, if you take the metro, it's a long walk. I think it's a little under a mile. It's worth it. But then you get there, and then, oh my God, you have yet another issue, and that is you can't bring your bag in, that you have your lip gloss. And
Hello, your powder,
your whatever
pins,
y'all got
your bobby
going on.
pins, your hair clips.
So
eyeshadow.
why do you have to bring all of that?
Because you want to be able to refresh. I know we're going to go see Beyonce, but I want to look good when I capture myself seeing Beyonce as well. And what if you're there, you know, you meet your Jay-Z? That might be a place that you meet your Jay at. You don't know. So you have to be ready. You have to stay ready so you don't have to get ready, but also be ready for a touch-up as well.
Gosh, that you should coin that. You might meet your Jay-Z.
You never know.
Oh, God. All right, yet again, that's getting underway this upcoming Friday and Monday. I didn't know she was having 2
Monday
shows.
as well, yes. So, you know, there are some ticket hacks that people have spoke about here and there, potentially waiting around on the day of and seeing if you can get tickets. If I was not out of town, that was the route that I was going to be taking. But if not, I'm sure you can still hear the concert from the parking lot. So, you know, it's worth the try.
Yeah, and yet again, I'll be at the Friday show,
Yes.
and I will not be wearing a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, for the record.
Well, that's something that you should have. And there are a lot of local businesses that offer these things. I believe there's a business in Maryland that's probably getting a lot of foot traffic because everyone is really emphasizing on the whole entire cowboy look from head to toe, which I love completely. I love the commitment.
All right, so for more information, log on to our website, fox5dc.com.
Yes.
And perhaps you too can go to the show and meet your Jay-Z.
Hello. Somebody.
You're supposed to say, ho.
Ho.
Sylvia, our digital content producer, joining us on the live. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone, a developing story. The man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022 has reached a plea agreement with prosecutors. I'm referring to Mr. BRYAN KOHBERGER, now pleading guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. Let's take a listen in.
On or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. And then as to count 5, also murder in the first degree, that on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing him, from which he died. Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
I want to also make, for the record, the defendant has provided with the guilty plea advisory form a document entitled Written Factual Basis that purports to have the defendant's signature dated 1 July 2025. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And did you agree with the written factual basis that is included there?
Yes.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
I would ask the state at this time to provide its recitation of its factual basis had this case gone to trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing in his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. KOHBERGER, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. KOHBERGER's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Latah County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was a traffic stop of Mr. KOHBERGER's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. KOHBERGER's name, Bryan KOHBERGER, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. KOHBERGER's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include at trial video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway just across the state line from Moscow that would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defendant's car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the 3rd floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Knodel was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the 3rd floor, it was on the 2nd floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were 2 other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen to where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom were to see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walinta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th of 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, And a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. KOHBERGER was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court and the public the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, you know, in those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, excuse me, Mr. KOHBERGER entered the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Cruz. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, based on the state's proffer and importantly based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. KOHBERGER, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor. The state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than one full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. Obviously we have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in one day.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. The week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties, or the next week, the week of August 4, is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date, because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public, and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. Without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th. We'll start at 9 in the morning. Does that give your team enough time, Sandra? 9 in the morning? All right. Any concerns with that date?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
No, sir.
All right. Any reason why I should not rescind the non-dissemination order at this time?
You're right. I think that given the history of this case, it would be best if that remained in place through sentencing, so we have time to make sure there's the ability to completely answer questions. That would be the state's preference and recommendation.
We'd have no objection for the order to remain in place through sentencing.
All right, I will, at this point, the idea to keep it until sentencing, which time it would be withdrawn.
All right, guys, there you have it. Yet again, a guilty plea from BRYAN KOHBERGER. This eliminates the death penalty, but he would still face a sentence of life without parole. Thank you so much for watching the Fox 5 Live Zone, guys. If you haven't already done so, let's go ahead and pull the full screen up with regard to all celebrations on the Independence Day. Yes, you see it right there on your screen. It's the National Parade from 11:45 until 2 p.m., and then the National Fireworks Show. I got to tell you, it's one of the best fireworks shows in the country. Why are we putting that up there? Because you see that QR code right there? You could click on it to make sure you can watch it. We are streaming it live right here on Fox Local. So that means if you don't want to, well, let's say, hot-tail it down to the Washington Monument, no need to. Just stay at home, or heck, you could be out and about having dinner and still watch the entire show right there on your phone. Of course, you have to have the Fox Local app in order to do so. I want to say thanks to all of the guests that got a chance to join us today. Obviously, we were all things covering P. Diddy. Special thank you to my producer, Emmy, and we thank you as well for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 12. Tell a friend, bring a friend, and we'll do it again. I'm Guy Lambert. Until then, make it a great day.